So when we were looking at this too in our picture, so I've started masking that. And then, do I need to be concerned about these lines of the branches? Maybe just this one big one. I could do this little one, but this main trunk area, for sure, I want to mask that. Then I want to think about those other trees, and I want to think about that little house. I know that if some of you are still drawing, it's totally cool. But those of you who are all done drawing, you can start masking, because this is going to take a while. This part of getting everything just right. And when we, tomorrow when we start to paint this, because masking is going to take a significant amount of time, we will not necessarily paint this whole thing. We'll paint most of it, and it'll be fairly quick once we have the tape layers down. If we were using masking tape, we would probably take the masking tape and put it on our clothes and pick up the lint so it's not as tacky. But this feels, you know, like pretty good. And I'm trying to make the tape feel natural as I'm putting the pieces on. I will have to, once I've done all the pieces, I will have to burnish the edges and make sure that it is down secure. Oops. So I will continue to do this whole thing. I'll have my sample up here so you can see what I've masked in step 1. Of course, I still need to work on this house and getting that just right. But that is step 1 of masking your landscape. We'll do step 2 here as soon as when we get this done. Use again. So looking at my picture here, we see this horizon line, and we want to divide this up because we're going to do a wet on wet wash and clouds tomorrow too. And so we don't want to just have a straight line. I am going to rip it so it's a little bit more jaggedy and more organic and natural. And it's going to go over some of those pieces of tape that we already have. So I am just kind of selecting where I want my horizon line to be. I do see that I have those lines for the trees off in the distance, and I'm just going to go right below those. Oops. And as I come across here, that's all I need to do. So that is step 2. So tomorrow when we come in, we're going to put this down. We're going to stretch the paper, and we'll talk about stretching the paper tomorrow. And then we'll do a wash. We'll do some clouds. We'll lift the first layer of masking tape and reverse it, do a wash down below, lift that up, and then we will start in with the detail. So I'm just going to let you work until until it's time to clean up. Make sure your brushes are clean. You need to have this masking all done by tomorrow. Make sure your name is on your paper. Put it on the reverse side, okay? And make sure you do a nice job cleaning up your mess.
Did you put that tape over the other tape?
Yes. And you'll find out you'll end up doing that. Yep. So now you want to do the horizon. So then take this.
What's my sketchbook?
It's like, feet and shoes. How about shoes that look like, how about those like jump gloves? How about those like feet? Yeah, let's try those. Water. Just walking like gentle. It's not like, yeah, you go one participant gloves. Cut and make the wand.
Because the final one is scary. I'm not gonna lie. It is scary. And the more knowledge we have, the better off. It's fine. It doesn't, for today, for tomorrow, it doesn't matter. Can you hold it? Yeah. And you see how it all.
No, I'm good. I'm gonna need it probably for. Okay. Are you gonna stay here for snack or something?
Yeah. Okay. That's going to help create our horizon line, and it may not be perfect, but this is going to kind of get our horizon line disseminated. And you can see mine's kind of crooked, and that's all right. I want that so it feels more natural. I need to make sure I burnish the edges down, so I want to take that flat end of my paintbrush and I want to compress and push down on that. All right, so I feel pretty good about that. Now I want to get my sky color mixed, and we are going to add clouds to this as well. We are going to have to mix a significant amount of paint before we begin doing this sky. Yesterday we took those two blues and mixed them together on the palette to do just that little rectangle, and then we pulled the clouds up. Now today we're going to have to mix at least twice as much. The other thing I am going to need is I am going to need a paper towel. So if you do not have a paper towel, make sure you grab a white paper towel from the back.
Does it matter where you put your horizon line, Kate?
No, it doesn't. And I'm just going off this image. So I'm just kind of making it the lower 2/3 of my drawing or of my painting. You all have this, right, in your box? Carl, do you not have yours?
Oh, we have it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start mixing those two blues, and because I will use a wet on wet technique with this. So I'm getting my two blues mixed. And I had water sitting in it, so it is somewhat pasty. So I'm grabbing a piece of that paint and I'm kind of letting it off into the palette, kind of blotting it in and lifting it down, because I want more than enough. All right. So I am ready to move forward. One more minute. Okay. All right. Getting my my brush, my large flat brush full of water. Not too much, not too little, and I'm working my way across the painting. And I'm only doing the top 2/3. I am not touching the bottom. We're going to deal with that later. I'm dipping into my paint, trying to pick up as much as possible, and I am pulling that paint. And I am gonna have to dip back into my water because I did not put enough water down. So I am getting that lovely gradation of dark to light. Thanks, my friend. So now I want to get some of those clouds pulled. And we're not going directly on that image that we see. We're gonna kind of work it and create our own. And I'm doing it in the upper right hand side of the painting. And I am having to work quickly because everything's drying. Quick, like lightning McQueen. So, I know that you all see the glare on the smartboard, but I am trying to, trying to work this quickly on that right side. I am grabbing a magic eraser now, and I am going to try to see if I can pull up some of the color. And the one thing I have to be mindful with the magic eraser is it does crumble a little bit. And this is that cheaper paper. It's not the greatest, but it does okay. Then I'm gonna grab my round brush and I'm dipping it in water and I'm going to start trying to pull out some more of the white from the paper. I am having my paper towel right next to me and I'm working in a swirling manner, trying to get it to pull up nicely. Kind of massaging the edges, and so we are lifting the paint up. And this part is the part that's going to take some time, just to kind of get it to where we want it to be. And then I want to soften the underneath the clouds a little bit, just pulling the color across. And I'm going to stop there for a moment so everybody can catch up. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the shading that I'm going to add is going to be super concentrated, but before I do it, I am going to take my brush and just kind of soften these edges up just a little bit more. I do try to make this somewhat easy, and I know that I do make it look easy, and it just takes practice. All right, so we have that going on, right? So there is some moisture there, and I am going to kind of drop some of that darker color in, just dropping it. I'm going to take that brush that I was just using that had water on it, and I want to kind of push it around. I gotta let go of that brush. I gotta push it around a little bit. I got too much water. And I want to create that little shaded area. And of course I didn't do it very well. Now, after I said I make it all look so easy, I lied. I screwed up. There we go. Oh, there it goes. Starting to happen. Getting that little subtle shading to happen underneath. Getting it to bleed there, nice. And then I'm going to take my paper towel. And then I'm looking at the top of my clouds here. I probably want to smooth those out just a little bit. All right. Over here is going to be a bunch of foliage, leaves, and all that fun stuff. Are we ready to move on? Nope? Okay. So I'm just going to start talking. Is that cool? All right. So we have our lovely horizon line. I'm now going to remove our tape that we used on our horizon line. But wait, as I'm pulling it off, you'll notice that I'm pulling it at a slight angle because I just want to make sure that the tape does not remove any of the tape that's underneath, and that I don't want to accidentally rip the paper by yanking it too hard. So I'm just being slow and steady, wins the race here. You'll notice that I have a nice clean line. Oops, I'm going to rip that off, attach that there. I'm sorry, Zach, what? Yeah, it is. All right, that feels pretty good. Nice. All right, so everybody should have a nice edge, correct? Yeah. Don't get rid of that tape, because this is going to be the tricky thing now. Hopefully this is drying pretty fast, and I want to just take a piece of paper over it and just kind of get it to dry, because we're going to take this tape and we're going to do the opposite way. So I'm just going to check. Pretty good enough for this practice one. And I want to just put it down on the edge. I don't necessarily have to put it down all the way, but I'm using the reverse edge there. And I might even have to rip the paper a little bit to get it to, rip the tape to get it to go down the way I need it to. Because now we are going to do a wash on the lower half of this.
Halker, what should I do with my piece of tape?
You want to lift it up, and you're using it the reverse way now. And so as you're doing it too, you might have to rip it to make it follow the line that you had. We'll do it all. Don't worry, we'll do it all.
I'm definitely confused.
That's okay.
Oh, so it goes on top.
Yep. It's like magic.
Yeah.
Again, you'll want to burnish those edges with your paintbrush that has the chiseled end. And I want to reference this picture again. I know that this area is yellow, and I could actually mask another area, but I'm not even going to bother. This is good enough. So we have the yellow, and then I see down in here, what are those colors down by the fence line? They're brown. What other colors do we have there?
Red.
What else?
Yellow.
Besides yellow, what else do we, there's a color down there. What is it?
Brown.
Look at it closely.
Blue.
Look at it closely. Look at it closely.
Yellow.
Violet, you're turning violet.
Where?
Look down deep.
Oh.
Oh, look. It's ever so subtle. So, all right, I'm gonna get ready to go here. Yes?
Wait, Halker.
Yes.
How are we supposed to flip this tape like around?
Yep, you do it the opposite way. Lift it up, and then you're gonna put it on the edge. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like if your thing's still wet, should you wait?
Try to take a piece of paper and try to dry it. And you can just watch me do it. Does that sound good? And then I'll pause. Because I think a bunch of friends up here are ready to go. Right? Okay, here we go. This is gonna get a little tricky here. We are not doing wet on wet. We are just going to do a wash. But I wanna get the colors just right. So I'm looking at that picture and it's a light kind of lemon yellow. So I'm picking up some of that yellow and I'm putting it in my palette because I want to make sure that's the right yellow. And that looks a little green to me. So I'm actually going to go to that second palette of color, and I think most everybody has it. And I'm going to grab a little yellow from there, and I'm going to mix the two. Because remember we talked about we want to avoid colors straight out of the palette. We want to use the colors mixed together. All right, I'll give you a moment to do that. Mix them together. Yeah, go for it. Give you a moment to do that. The two yellows together. Now you can also add a hint of the white in as well. So I've got that color ready to go. And then I'm actually going to take that brown and a little violet off to the other end of the palette. So this is where it gets tricky because we have all these colors that we need to blend together at once, so we got to prep them. And this is what watercolors are all about, is the prep work. So I am going to take that brown, oops, and I'm putting that in the other opposite side in that palette area. And I'm going to grab a little violet. And that violet seems really bright. So I will mix that with a little bit of the brown. So it's more of a, feels earthier. All right. And I want to look at my picture again and see if there's, I actually want to make a little bit of a red violet happening too. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of red. And my other red is a little bit goopier, so I'm going to grab a little of that red. And then I want to mix that into that brown and violet. So I have 3 different colors that I'm working with for my cast shadow. And I know the smart board, you can't tell the difference. Should I walk around so you all can see it? Yeah. Okay. So as I'm doing this, I'm going to lay down the yellow. And I'm going to have my brush is going to be wet, and I'm going to dip right into the yellow, and I'm going to work it. And then it's probably going to lighten up when I get close to the shed. Then I'm going to go the opposite way, and I want to start pulling in those browns and the violets, and then I'll be taking my paper towel and pulling up some color. And then I'll be taking my round brush and trying to get some details in. And we have to work kind of quickly. Sorry. At least we're practicing this before we start our final, so you know what to expect, right? All right, so I'm using my large flat brush. It's nice and wet. I'm going into my color and I'm scooping up my yellow color, starting at my right-hand corner, and I'm pulling it down. Grabbing that color and I'm pulling it down and across the edge. And if I did get a little blue into it, it's no big deal because we'll be covering it up. So I'm working rather quickly. You can kind of see that. And then now I'm going in for my browns and my violets. And I should look at my picture as I'm doing this. So remember I said I'm gonna have to work really quickly with this. My brush is rather wet. I'm getting the colors to kind of blend across. Layer 1 done. Now I'm going back in with my round brush, and I would love to stop, but I want to be careful to make sure that I get some things defined. So that's what I'm doing now. Going back in and pulling some color in over it all.
I'm just gonna grab an iPad.
Oh, go for it. Hopefully they're charged. That is my only concern. Sorry.
60, we're good.
Okay, good.
Wait, so what color should we use first?
I use that brown violet mixed together. And I will stop right there for the moment. Yep. I don't need to do anything more, I don't think. Oh, I forgot to kind of pull it up a little.
This is not the right color at all.
All right, so now we've done all of this, and we're just gonna let it dry, and we are going to gently pull off that other piece of tape. Now look, I messed up. Oh dear. So that's why it's really important to pay attention to when you mask off an area. Of course I didn't do that purposefully, not at all. But you have to be mindful, especially when you're masking. All right, so let's continue on this now. Yep, go ahead and take the tape off on the hillside. So everything probably looks pretty rough to you at this point, correct? All right, so this is where we want things to dry so we can start putting in the detail. And what I would do is, remember yesterday we talked about with our landscapes, we want to work from background to middle ground to foreground, right, Carl? So we have done the background color. So now we want to concentrate on the middle ground, this area here. So when we look at the background of this painting, we see these lovely kind of bushes or trees in the distance. So, oh, be with me, 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, friends. Carl, or not Carl, Cornell, be with me for 2 seconds. Okay. So we see here that this color in the background is a lot lighter than the colors in the foreground. We also notice that there's probably 2 different types of green happening there, right? So I'm going to mix from my palette this light green and the yellow from the double palette. I'm going to mix those together. I'm going to be using my medium round brush. So let's mix those colors. It doesn't matter, it's just practice. So I'm going to take the green and I'm putting it in the palette where I mixed up the yellow area. And sometimes we have to take a paper towel to clean out an area. Then I'm going to take some yellow and I'm going to mix them together. And I'm feeling pretty good about that color. So should I pause? Okay. Just green and yellow. If I feel like it's too bright, I could add a touch of this darker green in there, but I don't want to do too much. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now if I wanted to, I could take another brush and mix another green up. I'm going to take that green, that lighter green, and mix it in the palette in the corner. And I am going to add just a hint of that darker green, so I have two different greens happening. So I have a light green and a dark green. I have a light green and I have a dark green. And I'm ready to rock and roll. I don't want this paint to be too runny. I want to keep it somewhat thick, because if there's too much water, it's just going to go everywhere. So this is the fun part. Everybody will be successful in doing this. I am just going to do some squiggles with my dark, actually I should be doing it with my lighter green first. Kind of doing just some squiggles for this tree line. I'm just doing some squiggles, keeping it simple. Keeping it way simple with my lighter green. I am kind of following my pencil lines that I had. And oh my, we'll have to figure out how to cover up my mistake here in the middle, but we'll worry about that later. Oh, I feel good about that. Now I'm gonna take my darker green that I have and I'm gonna work that in. So I'm technically, what I'm doing right now, if it was dry, I'd be doing some glazing, but I'm just kind of dropping that color over the light color just to kind of give an appearance, an illusion of depth. So you can see how that is just ever so subtle and slight. So remember, tomorrow you do need to have your final landscape here. Ooh, I got a little bit too dark there. Tomorrow we will continue on this one for a little bit, and then we'll start thinking and looking at our final. Now, if this was my final, I'd probably layer up 3 different colors just to give it a little bit more depth to it. And I would do that by going to the base here of these trees or bushes and just putting another darker value down in there. But this is, you know, this just takes patience, and I know that this can be very frustrating, especially since watercolors are a little on the moody side. They're temperamental. And you gotta know how to take control with them, and when to use water, and when to hold back on the water a little bit, because you don't want them to run away from you. And I actually think it looks really quite good by adding that darker value right in there to get it to feed up. And you'll notice this is taking me a little bit of time to do. Even though they're just squiggles, it's giving us that impression of a forest in the backdrop. I'm gonna grab that darker green. There we go, dropping that color in just to get it to add a little bit more illusion of depth there. Did somebody say, oh, could you add brown? You could if you really wanted to. Can add a little brown to the base of that. I'm not doing it the whole way through, of course, just in certain sections with that brown. I have to be careful because sometimes I get a little overzealous with color. Awesome, that looks pretty good. All right, ready for the next step? Yes? Okay, great. Start peeling off the tape. Start peeling off the tape. Come on, Carl. Oh, it's not a, it's a, all right. So, we're gonna leave. Okay, so we're gonna move forward here. And what we need to do is we need to let this dry so then we can put in the details. Here on the horizon line, we need to put in our bushes. And this is probably going to be the easiest, or our trees. We're going to make a series of colors and layer them up. And they're just squiggle lines. So we need a light green, a dark green, and we're going to be taking a brown. So how I do this to begin with, it's super easy. I'm going to take my green, my light green. I'm going to throw it down into where my yellow is because I've got some space there, and it's okay if the yellow gets into that green. I don't mind that. I'm going to grab a little bit more. I'm taking the lightest green. And then I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to pick up a little white. So I have a very light green. Then I want to make sure that my other green is ready to go. So I can use that. Then I am going to take a little bit of that green and put it back into the palette so it's sitting next to our light green. So this is going to be our medium green, right? But we're going to add a little bit of that dark green into it, just a touch of it. All right, we're going to start with those two greens. This is so fun and easy. This will be the best part of the painting. My paintbrush is wet. I'm using a round, and I'm dipping into the light green, and I'm just throwing down some squiggles, of my tree line. Oh yeah, just throwing down some squiggles. I want to make sure it's pretty wet though. I'm just throwing down some squiggles. Some wiggles and some squiggles. Throwing down some wiggles and some squiggles. Making sure everything's fairly wet. Then I'm going to go to that dark green or that medium green that we made, and I want to start to drop some color into that. I don't want to go all the way to the top, but I'm just kind of building up those layers.